Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new player guide for 2024 of Call to Arms Gates of Hell Ostfront. The game recently had a sale, so I'm sure a lot of people are flooding into the game. I think this is one of the best games of all time, just flat out. It's supremely detailed, it's very intriguing. The sandbox mechanics expand typical RTS and RTT gameplay beyond anything else that exists out there. This game's incredible and absolutely worth your time. But at the same time, I know that the deeper mechanics and more intricate mechanics can throw people off sometimes and make it very difficult to pick up and play. Right? So this guide is intended to really quickly get you up to speed on the basic and advanced mechanics of this game and just run you through everything that you might not know, might want to know, etc. And then we're going to finish off with a just like low-level skirmish game to show you that you don't really need to utilize all of these advanced mechanics all at the same time, especially if you have experience coming from something like COH, like Company of Heroes, or Steel Division, or Warno, or some other real-time tactics game, a real-time strategy game. You most likely are not going to be that lost. Okay? Okay. All right, let's get started. We're just going to run through the menus really fast because I know that this could also throw people off. There's a lot of like cool hidden content everywhere, so let's get into it. Right, so we're at the menu screen right now, but the only things you really need to be concerned with as a player is the single player and multiplayer tabs. You may be forgiven for looking at these tabs and thinking that there just isn't much to them, but that's very far from the truth. There's actually a lot of content hidden within these simple tabs. So that's why we're going to go through them real quick. So here in single player, this denotes the two main single player game modes of the game, but there are also multiple campaigns within this. So quickly, campaign shows all the different campaigns per faction in the game. So if you select a campaign, you'll see Finland, Germany, USSR, USA, depending on what DLC you own. Obviously, the base game is just Germany and USSR because it's the Eastern Front. Although I do highly recommend all the DLCs. They're all fantastic. Just going to plug that real fast. But the important thing I want to divert your attention to is that your tutorial as a new player is here in the Germany tab. This campaign, Basic Combat Training 1939 to 1941, is your tutorial. And I highly, highly recommend that you play this as a brand new player because it's going to very gently push you through the things like picking up items and transferring things out of your inventory and refilling your ammunition and moving around as a direct controlled character. I don't think it teaches all of the mechanics in the game that may be useful in something like Skirmish, especially, or PvP. And that's more what I'm going to be going into in this tutorial video. But I highly recommend that you do play this if you haven't before. And I completely understand not being able to find this because it is nested within all of these tabs. But otherwise, the campaign tab goes through multiple different campaigns depending on what DLCs you own for every faction. So some factions don't have many campaigns, like the USSR just has its original Za Rodinu campaign, right? Whereas Germany has multiple depending on if you own Liberation. The US has two depending if you own Airborne, etc., etc. Conquest is an amazing game mode. This is one that a lot of people just play only and play nothing else because it's just that good. If you're familiar with Total War games, Conquest is sort of like that. In that you build up an army based on your faction, and there's a tech tree, there's resources that you collect, and you basically go between attack and defending, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and slowly building up your tech tree, building up your army, building up your munitions, and your abilities, and you get stronger as the game progresses. It's also very similar to Company of Heroes 2's Ardennes Assault, in terms of format, if you've played that. If you have played Ardennes Assault, it's extremely similar, except for Conquest in Gates of Hell really leans into the procedural aspect and randomly generates every single mission, so you never really know what you're going to get. In my opinion, it's an amazing game mode, and everybody should try it at least once. And you can set up all your little head cannons. Like you could do, a Luftwaffe build. You could do, prisoner brigades for the USSR. You could be defending the homeland as Finland. All sorts of fun stuff. And now we're going to flip over to the multiplayer tab. All right, so we're going to discuss how to play a multiplayer match or set up your own skirmish matches against AI. I'm going to be setting up a one-player skirmish match in order to show you the ropes of how to maneuver AI and how the game mechanics sort of work. So if you have the game open right now, I highly recommend that you follow along with me and set up a skirmish match in the same way so that you can really quickly get into the game and see what's going on. Okay. So online games explanatory. We're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to go into Skirmish, which is your, PvP fight against AI, typical RTS mode, right? We're going to go to local Skirmish for local, so it's just going to be us. And you're going to see 4 different game modes. Out of all of these, Battle Zones is the typical premier game mode. Domination and Last Stand are a little fun, but Battle Zones is the typical skirmish match. Cooperative is actually how you play the campaign cooperatively with your friends. So you'll see a bunch of campaign missions in here. But right now we're going to focus on Battle Zones. So these numbers next to the maps denote the maximum amount of players that is allowed on that map. So we're going to pick a very simple map. Crossing, which doesn't have very much going on. It's just a base game map. It's very flat, which works for us right now. You can type a password if you want. That's to keep people out of your server, but we don't have to worry about that right now. We're just going to create this match, and we're going to be auto-filled with an AI, right? And so typically the game starts off with Axis versus Allies, as it should, right? You can actually make it to specific nations as well. So we could do Germany versus Germany if we, don't care at all. Or we're like USA versus USA if we're doing like some weird civil war thing, you can get fun with it. But generally it's Axis versus Allies. That's the typical mode. And so you're going to want to select, a player army. So right now you'll see that we only have USSR and USA. That's because we're in the Allies tab right now. You can also select using this little flag indicator. So right now we're USSR, then we're USA, etc., etc. But I understand. I understand everyone wants to play with the cool German toys. So we're gonna pick Germany, as I think a lot of people who hop into the game do, because who doesn't love a 2-2-2 or 2-3-1 or a Jagdpanther or whatever, right? So that's going to be all under Germany, and so that's what we're gonna play right now. All right, so now that we've set up our Allies and Axis tab and set ourselves up as Germany. The main 2 things that I want to divert your attention to, which you're always going to be editing when you get into a skirmish match, is War Stage and Doctrine, okay? So War Stage basically denotes what years does this skirmish match take place in, and what level of technology are we going to be seeing, right? Because in early war, you're going to be seeing a lot flimsier armor, a lot slower tanks, less reliance on armor in general, and more reliance on infantry and support weapons. Whereas late game, you're gonna start seeing, your Panthers, your Jagdpanzers, your IS tanks, and your rocket artillery, etc., etc. So be aware of these differences. As a new player, I would highly recommend playing early war, 39 to 41, because it is slower and more infantry focused, so you can sort of get the ropes, just be aware that your tanks at this stage will probably die with a direct AT shell shot. But that's the fun of it, Early war is also fun. Mid war is also fun. Late war is also fun. I highly recommend playing around with all of these. They're all very, very fun. But the easiest to learn is early war. That's how I learned the game, and that's how I insist that you will best learn the game. Okay, so Doctrine, also. Just like how War Stage changes all the units you have available, Doctrine changes two specific tabs on your units. These tabs, just so we can get this out of the way in the game, this is referring to infantry. This is, you don't need to worry about the second tab. This is just very specific infantry, which is almost, you're never going to have to worry about this in Skirmish especially. This is support weapons, like your machine guns, your AT guns, field guns, etc. This is your light vehicles. This is your heavy vehicles, your cavalry, your Panzer IVs, etc. And this is your doctrinal tab. So your doctrine, what you select here, all-around defensive, irregular, offensive, and support, will dictate your infantry tab specifically and your doctrine tab. So an all-around doctrine will obviously have, all-rounders for its infantry. It'll have, basic rifle squads, have Gerbsjäger, these sorts of units. But then if you get to defensive, all of a sudden all your infantry is, has these little shields. That means that generally this is more defensive focused. So they're going to be slower, but they're going to be better when behind cover and just kind of sitting around. They're not going to be assault squads, right? If you want assault squads, you go to offensive and you get these, or you just play all around and sort of have a little bit of everything. But the biggest thing is definitely this doctrine tab, because these units are completely different depending on your doctrine. So all around, you'll have very unique units. All of these units are unique to that doctrine and cannot be called in through any other way. So this Panzer 735F, right? You can't find this here. You won't find it in any other tab. That's specifically for this doctrine. So I would recommend playing around with these and just sort of figuring out what you jive best with. If you want your big tanks, that's going to be your offensive tab. Irregular typically is all about air bombardments. That's irregular thing, as well as general artillery bombardments. It gets little fun things like this LG-40, which is unique to this. It gets a 231 in early war. Defensive is all about your artillery and your AT capabilities. And all around is all year round, right? So just play around with that, figure it out. We're going to go all around right now because it's the easiest to learn. Oh, and support, by the way, is based on the Scorched Earth DLC. If you buy it, you support the development of the game. And you get a huge fucking explosion machine with the Karl Garat, which is literally a railway cannon, and it's sick and it's amazing and I love it. But only buy it if you love the game. I love the game, so I bought it. But right now we're gonna pick all around. Okay, and we're gonna hop into the game because that's all we need to do. See you in the game. Okay, so I'd like to start by going over all the things you see on your HUD. Right? So at the top, you'll see your team score and the enemy team score. This number next to your flags denotes the amount of battle zones that you have captured, which are these points across the map. The timer will tick up. This is quite important to pay attention to for some doctrinal reasons that we'll discover later. And these are your scores. Everybody starts at 250, and it goes up from there, up or down, depending on the amount of points controlled. You can either win by getting 1,000 or taking your opponent's total to 0. All right. So on the left, you have your minimap, which very conveniently shows you your north, east, west, and south. You'll have your objectives here, which is more important in the story mode, not so much here. Up here, you'll see game menu, message history, highlight silhouettes, highlight items, and highlight corpses. You can do these through keybinds. Items and corpses can be done through C and V. Very useful to do. It's just sort of reminding you that those features exist, and because they can be very important. Up here, you'll see your score table. Good at keeping track, Chat with Z. And event history, also important in the campaign. All right, on the right is the most important thing that you'll be looking at throughout the entire game. Right here in gold is your manpower. This is your main currency that you'll be spending on units. All units generally cost manpower, 70 MP, 75, 113, right? All your tanks cost manpower, everything costs manpower. The better stuff usually costs more, right? Typical RTS stuff. Manpower goes up at a semi-consistent rate. There is a very complicated math that goes into it, but it basically amounts to, it depends on the amount of units that you have fielded at one time and the amount that you have lost in a sort of catch-up mechanic. Also, in battle zones, at least in Skirmish, the amount of manpower that you get drops to damn near zero at about 40 minutes exactly. So be very careful about that because you'll find you're starting to have to repair destroyed tanks and whatnot, especially in a very prolonged match. That's just a mechanic to sort of like kill a very long game from stretching out forever. Below your manpower is your doctrinal points. You always start with maximum doctrinal points. Right now we have 200 at 200. You will never tick up in doctrinal points. This is just a currency that you always have the top, like the full amount of, and you should spend as you see fit. As your doctrinal tab opens up, you can start to spend these on units. You'll see this Panzer 735 costs 25 doctrinal points, which is not very much, right? You have 200. And even your top of the line unit, like your 10 centimeter artillery piece, costs 90. So you're still left with 110. I would highly recommend spending your doctrinal points as much as possible to fill out your army, because manpower only goes so far. And your enemies, especially the AI, will be spending these doctrinal points the second that they can field these units, because it is so strong. These units are meant to be good. They're meant to be strong, right? Okay, and below that is your CP. I believe it stands for command points or something to that effect. This is just your population cap. This is just how many units you can field at once. This will actually go up over time. Right now we have a max of 130. This will go up to, I think, like 200 as the game progresses. Specifically, once these tiers go up onto the second tier and third tier. So don't be worried. Don't feel constrained in terms of your army size, because some of the tanks, some of the heavy tanks do cost like 25 CP. Infantry squads cost like 29, 36 CP, you know, depending on the amount of units in them. So be aware that it does go up. So don't be afraid to buy units as you see fit. Okay, and we discussed this tab before, these tabs, but let's go over them once again. This is your infantry tab, right? This will change depending on your doctrinal selection. But, you know, as it goes up in these tiers, so it's like 1, 2, 3, these will get better as they go on. The better ones are more expensive for reasons that we'll go into later. This is your individual units tab. You can pretty much ignore all of these until you get a bearing of like why you would want an AT detachment, for example, or a single MG operator, or an officer, or an ammo crate. Officers in the past used to increase your CP amount. I do not believe that they do that anymore, but they come with binoculars, so I would ignore this. Snipers can be fun for, you know, sniper reasons. The only one you typically end up using are tank crew and German ammo crate. These are always filler, right? You would never use this as a main anything, so don't worry about these. This is just for people who kind of know what they're doing and want very specific units to fill out their crew. This is your support weapon tab, much more important, especially in early war. You're going to have your MG guns, your flak guns, your AT guns, which fire straight, your field guns, which fire in an arc, and your indirect fire, so mortars, artillery pieces, etc. This is your light vehicle tab. Some of these will actually start blocked off at the start of the match, so your armored transports, things like that. This is just anything that moves fast and, you know, whether it hits hard or not, whether it's just for transport. I'll also direct your attention to this little hitch icon. That's the sort of weight that it can carry. So some emplacements require a 3-dot hitch. So that's just a heavy towing capability. It seems like all of these, because they're Opel Blitz trucks, can carry 3 dots. But some things like this bicycle can only carry 1 dot. So that means lighter equipment, right? That's because AT guns, for example, can be towed by 1-dot items. But some artillery emplacements, like this one, you can see is 2 dots. And some very, very heavy things require like a full truck to carry. Some tanks can also tow, just like this Panzer Kampfwagen 1. Okay, so the tank tab will open up progressively over time. This is always your tank tab. I will also mention that these tabs will change their icon to reflect the most expensive unit that just unlocked, to sort of tell you like, hey, maybe consider buying this, right? Right now that's the Panzerjäger 1, but once we get the Panzerkampfwagen 3, that will change, that icon will change to that. But this is always your armor tab, like your tanks and whatnot. This last tab is your doctrinal units tab. Again, you will spend your doctrinal points on this, not manpower, so definitely buy them. It's always very, very worth it. And these are unique units, right? So this Panzer 73F does not exist on any other doctrine. This 8 centimeter mortar, a rapid fire variant, is unique to this specific doctrine. Some of the heavy artillery pieces, unique for this specific doctrine. Artillery signalers, etc., etc. Like, definitely make use of these tabs. All right, and we'll get into the mechanics shortly. All right, so we're in right now. Where we start, where our camera starts, is our headquarters, essentially. This is just where our units will spawn in. So once this timer begins, we can spawn in a unit. Typically, I would recommend spawning in a rifle squad because they're just all-rounders. We'll get into why you want a rifle squad as opposed to a cheaper squad like an ersatz in a little bit. But right now we're just going to start with movement. You can move your camera around with WASD. You orbit it with middle mouse. This is actually very important, as you will want to take note of terrain. We'll also get into that later into this guide. Zoom in and out with the scroll wheel. And you can right-click on the mini-map to get around the map very quickly. The mini-map will show you any relevant units that you've spotted as well. You can see your infantry's FOV on the mini-map and a lot of other helpful information over there. So just make sure to keep that open with M. Okay, so we're just going to discuss movement because right now our rifle squad is all bunched up like this. If you just right-click somewhere, then they'll move somewhat quickly, right? They're just moving to whatever your location you give them in just a bunched up sort of formation. If you double right-click, then they will sprint and they will start using their stamina, which will start ticking down. This is a faster movement, of course, but it drains their stamina, so you don't want to just use it all the time. If you press Alt, they will immediately crouch in place. When crouching, they're going to be a lot more effective in combat. They're going to be harder to hit, simply based on the physics of it all, and their accuracy will be better. If you press Control, then they will immediately prone onto the ground, which is the best thing to do if you're caught off guard. One important note in this game is that units cannot fire on the move, period. Infantry does not fire on the move in Gates of Hell Ostfront, and this is something that may catch you off guard if you come over from something like Company of Heroes or Steel Division, but infantry cannot fire on the move. So if you are moving them forward like this, and they start taking shots from the side, you're going to want to prone them out immediately so they can fire back, right? If they're not in cover, they need to be proned out or something because a single machine gun would wipe a full squad running. Their survivability is a lot higher when proned or crouched. Okay? All right. We'll get into bounding tactics later on, but for now, you can just keep that in mind. Units cannot move while you're moving, cannot fire while moving them. So be aware of that and don't run into an enemy's line of fire. Okay, so next thing we want to talk about is spacing. Being bunched up is really good if you want to have a high volume of fire coming out from your entire infantry squad at a specific unit or target, right? However, it's not very helpful if you're trying to defend a point. Or if you're being bombarded with artillery or field guns or something to that effect. Because a single HE shell could more than likely wipe out this entire squad because they're bunched up. So what you're going to want to do, if that's happening or you want them to space out for some reason, you would just simply hold right-click and drag, and you'll see these little circles which denote where your infantry would be standing. So now you'll see they're all spaced out much more evenly. so that a single MG burst can't wipe this entire squad, a single HE shell can't wipe this entire squad, and if you want to move them up, they can move up spaced like this. All right, and just simply right-click again, and they'll bunch up however you need. And very importantly, cover is simply taken by just right-clicking on anything which shows this little silhouette and icon on the cursor. If you see these silhouettes, that will show you exactly where your soldier will be standing. This is very important because bullets come out of the barrels of infantry's rifles. This may sound obvious, but if you have played something like Company of Heroes, infantry in that game can shoot straight through cover, straight through terrain. Not in this game. In this game, bullets will come straight out of their rifles, and not in some gamified sort of fashion, right? In the same way, grenade arcs and whatnot need to actually be able to arc over cover. And one thing I'll point your attention to is that cover in this game functions like actual cover would in real life. So this cover, although it is cover, and it will provide the benefits of cover, which are improved accuracy and generally being a little harder to hit and more cohesion against suppression, these sorts of things. Generally, accuracy benefits are what you're really looking for. The issue with this is that this is not effective cover, right? This is a wood fence, and these will not stop bullets. So if you play something like, again, if you play something like Company of Heroes, or you play Steel Division, you might be forgiven for thinking that all cover is built the same. Not true in this game, right? You'll see that this wooden fence will not stop a shot to the chest, thorax, head, anything like that, right? It may make it a little harder at some ranges to penetrate through this fence, right? This will stop a bullet from hitting this man. But at the same time, I could just shoot him in the leg. So this is extremely ineffective cover. You're only putting your troops into cover like this, or into bushes and that sort of thing, in order to gain the benefits generally attributable to cover, like accuracy, like suppression, these sorts of things. This is not actually effective cover, and don't expect this to be shot blocking in the same way that it is in Company of Heroes or Steel Division. What is effective cover, typically, is something that, based on your common sense, would block a bullet, would stop a bullet. So walls, for example, stop a bullet. If you want to garrison a structure, simply click on the windows that you want them to garrison. So not on this side, but let's say this side, if we want to watch out this way. And your infantry will automatically pile in. Let me yoink one guy, just to prove this point. But of course, this building will provide far better cover, right? Because there's a little bit of a window frame blocking them. I can't shoot this guy in the legs anymore, and neither can the AI. That is a lot better than putting them in a bush or behind a fence or something like that. A lot of Gates of Hell really comes down to that sort of common sense. If you think that's how it might work in real life, it probably is how it works in this game. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. You can burn down forests, you can burn down buildings with Molotovs, you can blow buildings up with shells. If you don't like cover, just get rid of it. You can build cover, you can build garrisons. I can tell this guy to build a foxhole, and the foxhole, because it has sandbags, is a lot more effective of cover than, say, this bush, which is also technically cover, but it's not going to block a shot. Right? This is just going to make it harder for the enemy to maybe see them or something like that, but it's not going to shot block. Whereas this guy's foxhole will. All right. Now that we've gone over the basics of cover, I want to introduce you to the differences between rifle squads. So this is an Ursas rifle section. I bought this for 70 manpower, which is much cheaper than this 113 manpower squad. And you may be forgiven for thinking, well, what's the big difference? These are just a bunch of guys with a bunch of rifles, and, that works for me. But you'll find that, in reality, the more expensive a squad is, generally, the better they are, for a number of factors that are not immediately obvious to new players, especially. You may look at an ersatz rifle squad, a rifle squad, a veteran rifle squad, an elite rifle squad, and a Gebirgsjäger. Sorry, I don't speak German, but these tier 4 infantry, and think, well, what's the big difference? They're just a bunch of dudes with rifles. That's not the case, right? So even in early war, there's quite some big differences. If you look at these ersatz riflemen, they're not really equipped with much. They don't even have helmets. Well, maybe this guy, but they don't have much equipment on them. All they have is the Kar 98K, and you'll notice that this entire squad is just equipped with Kar 98K rifles, right? That's a pretty big immediate difference. They only have Kar 98K rifles, whereas a real rifle section, a quality rifle section, will usually have a machine gunner. A single machine gunner is a gigantic increase on your damage per second, your rate of fire, your suppression, all this sort of stuff, simply on account that this machine gun can fire many rounds faster than a Kar 98K, right? And this goes exponentially higher once they have things like MG34s, MG42s, etc., etc., etc. This is just a cheap MG26, but already that's a huge fire rate improvement, and therefore, damage per second improvement and survivability improvement. Second of all, you'll notice that these ersatz riflemen have 150 health, 75 stamina, and 2 stars on their rifle proficiency, right? Whereas these rifle squad members will each have 200 health, 125 stamina, and 3 stars on their rifle proficiency. That means that these guys can take more damage, run faster, right? And hit more shots. They will also waste less ammo and generally survive more than these guys, right? So I would not rely on conscripts. Conscripts are great to fill a point, or stay in the back line, or do something that doesn't really require them to be much more than filler. But these rifle squad members are your real effective infantry. This is the start of your effective infantry. You really want that rifle proficiency. You really want that health. You really want those accuracy benefits. You really want the rate of fire of the machine gun. These sorts of things. I would not rely on backline infantry just because they're cheap. That's generally a mistake that a lot of players make. Okay, so now that we've discussed that, let's move on to inventory systems. Okay, so one thing that is unique to this game, as far as I know, is that all the equipment you see on these guys is real, tangible equipment. These are like things that they're physically carrying on their person. Why is that? Okay, so I mentioned this MG operator, right? Well, he doesn't fire infinitely. This is not like Company of Heroes where an MG team just fires an infinite volley of ammunition. This guy, if you press I, has an actual inventory screen. And he has 20 round magazines, and he has, this many magazines that he can fire off. He also only has 1 bandage on him, and he has a shovel, which he can use to entrench, right? If he did not have the shovel, he couldn't entrench. If he didn't have a bandage, then he couldn't bandage his wounds. This sort of stuff, right? You'll notice that this guy has no grenades on his person, so he can't throw grenades. The F1, F2, F3 keys are blank for him. But if I hover over this guy, he can throw 2 grenades and 1 smoke grenade. So if we look in his inventory, that's because he has 2 grenades and a smoke grenade, right? He has 4 bandages, and because this is the assistant gunner, he will pass over these 20-round magazines of machine gun ammunition to the MG operator automatically, as long as they're in the same squad together. And, he's alive. This also means that infantry in this game can physically pick up items off of out of crates or off of other people's persons in order to fill out their inventory. So let's say you're in the heat of battle and this guy's dead, right? Your MG operator's dead, and you really need that machine gun for the rate of fire bonus that we talked about earlier, right? Like you need that the volume of fire, the suppression, etc., etc., etc. So this guy can actually pick up that machine gun by holding. If you hold the V key, you'll see corpses on the ground, and you can right click on this guy and then take whatever you need. You can take his bandages. You know, if I even take this guy's cap off and then you put on this guy's helmet or whatever. And now he has the machine gun, right? Now, he's not as good as using the machine gun as the machine gun operator. He only has two-star proficiency. But, you know, it's a lot better than just leaving the machine gun on the ground. This is something that you might want to keep track of. This inventory system also means that infantry can run out of ammo, right? These basic infantry only have so much ammunition, and you know it takes a long time to run out of ammunition, especially in skirmish. Very rarely will you have to resupply, but if you did need to resupply, you can either get an ammo crate or a supply truck, which I'll buy a supply truck because it's quicker. And this supply truck will automatically resupply equipment such as ammunition, grenades, and bandages to soldiers as long as it's within the radius while it's stopped and they're out of combat. See this little circle? You can see that these guys are now refitting their equipment, right? They didn't waste much ammunition, but that's how it is. One last thing I want to talk about with infantry gameplay is bounding tactics, right? So we talked about how infantry cannot fire on the move ever, and don't expect them to. They won't do it. That's just how the game works. So you might notice sometimes that if you select all your units, oh, now I have 2 squads. You know, what's going on? Well, these are the same squads still. They're still classified as the same squad, but you can split them apart. This is so that you can do fun things like you can move these guys independently and set them up in this position, right? So you have more of an arc of fire or something like that, as opposed to these guys. Who maybe you want them to watch the southwest, and you want these guys to watch the southeast. So another really important thing to use this for, and let me just clarify, you don't need to be doing this all the time. You can very much play the game by just keeping them as one unit and moving them cohesively. And I should recommend that a lot of new players just do this so that they don't get lost or confused or wonder why their infantry is missing all the time. You can play this Company of Heroes style. You know, it's all one unit. Although there are situations where, yeah, you do want to split them. One such situation is bounding. So because your infantry cannot fire on the move, what you might want to do is split this team in half, right? Let's say this about half, right? Split this team in half so that I want these guys to move up over here, right? I'm gonna cross, hopefully from cover to cover, but you know, if there's no cover, then I guess proning out will do. Prone out, and then I'm gonna move these guys ahead of them. So basically, it's bound, 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 bound. So half the squad stays put and watches while the other squad moves up. So now I'm gonna drop these guys, and now they're gonna run up, and I'm gonna move them up to that cover, right? So that if anything happens, these guys are not just dead because they have somebody watching their back. They have somebody suppressing the enemy if they show up and start opening fire, right? This is just something to keep in mind because it can be useful. One last thing I'll also mention that I forgot to mention with infantry is that just like how you can split them up like this, holding right click and dragging, while in an open field, you can also do that with cover. So if you don't want them all bunched up in one position, because let's say there's a tank just right ahead of them, right? And this tank, a single HE shell is going to kill all these guys, which, trust me, it will in Gates of Hell. It absolutely will. What you're going to want to do is actually right-click that point that you want them to be sort of in the vicinity of, and then drag while holding that in that cover, right? And you'll start seeing the silhouettes move around, right, in a radius. So that's them taking cover positions near the cover that you've marked, right? So this is a lot more effective if you're taking, like if you're running into a tank that's firing HE shells, or just in general you want to be spaced out because you don't want to get bursted by a machine gun, right? These guys are still all one squad. They're all still together, so you can just click them up over here and then, move them out using the icon. But this is very useful if you don't want them to just get ripped into by a coaxial gun or something like that. Okay, so that's pretty much it for infantry combat and mechanics. Except for direct control. I should mention direct control. I really should, because this is a unique mechanic that no other RTT RTS game has. So with direct control, if you press E, you'll take control of an infantryman. Actually, typically it looks something like this. If you hold WSD, I can fire in the move all in direct control, but they can't do it. The AI can't do it for some reason, but that's just how it is. So if you press T, I'll go over the shoulder. You can scroll in and out, and now you have this little immersive mode, and you can live out your World War II fantasies or whatever. But this is more than just a tacked on gimmick. This is actually very effective if you want to do something very specific that you don't trust the AI to do for whatever reason. So, for example, I sometimes would direct control somebody if I have a Panzerfaust, right? If I have some sort of AT solution and I cannot afford to miss that shot, I would direct control, because your accuracy is a lot better in direct control. Simply on account of, you're a human being and you're not bound to mathematical equations to hit your shots, right? In the same breath, if you have, somebody with a particular gun that you want them to really hit their shots on, it's worth direct controlling these units. Direct control is mostly used for tank combat, I would say, but it can be very useful to know for infantry combat. Okay, that's really it for infantry. We're going to cut that out. And now we're going to move on to support weapons. Okay, so generally there are different types of support weapons. I would classify them as machine guns, such as this Lafette MG34. I'm going to put this over here to show something. Flak, which is really effective against infantry, light vehicles, and planes, just because you're firing a pretty heavy shell. 2 centimeter shell against somebody will annihilate them. AT guns and field guns. I'm going to show off the field guns and AT guns in particular. Maybe over here might be a really good example for these. Just move them out. Generally, you just move these support weapons. Support weapons cannot be moved by right-clicking. You have to right-click and drag in the direction that you want them to be aiming when they show up over there. Yeah, same with this MG. If you just point, all they'll do is change the direction of the barrel. So you want to click and drag to move them. Just good to know, right? It's also really good because you want to angle them in a specific direction for what I'm about to discuss in a second. And also artillery, right? So indirect fire is what we would call it. All of these are extremely useful, especially in early war. In early war, you'll find that support weapons absolutely dominate because the armor just isn't as strong, and it hasn't really become all so mechanized just yet. Right, so we have our machine gun over here, and I'm going to demonstrate the importance of positioning. So support weapons are extremely strong in this game. They're incredibly strong, especially in early war, mid-war, but pretty much the entire game. They will win you games, but it's all about positioning them in the right spots. What do I mean by this? I mean, I have a machine gunner right here, right? I have this Lafette MG34, fires like crazy. Is it going to kill this infantryman right here? Let's say he's pulled up on this fence line, right? This is an invader or whatever. Is it going to kill this guy? Now, if you've played a lot of Company of Heroes or something to that effect, you might say, of course he'll kill this guy. The answer is no. It's going to very embarrassingly fire into the ground, and not do anything, right? This AI cannot kill this infantryman, right? Whereas this infantryman can prone out and throw a grenade on this guy super easy, which I won't demonstrate because I'll end up killing the crew. But this AI cannot shoot this guy. And this is the source of a lot of frustration for a lot of new players, because they'll look at this and say, well, why can't they? This guy's in a field. This guy's in a field. Why can't this guy shoot this guy? Well, the reality is that terrain in this game matters. If you play something like Steel Division, you might be aware of this. But look, there's a huge bump right here, right? If you take direct control of this MG team, you'll see they can't see anything because there's this huge mound in the way, right? This is what I mean by positioning being super, super, super important. You're going to want to move up these support weapons in positions where they can actually see what it is you're trying to shoot at. So now, you know, this guy's dead to rights. We got him, you know. Super easy. But that's only because I took into account this terrain. Unfortunately, unlike Steel Division, there is no line of sight tool. However, if you take direct control, very briefly, you'll be able to see, okay, can this guy shoot this? Can this guy shoot that? Can he shoot this? Can he shoot that, right? And as you can see, the green orb will tell you, yes, he can shoot all the way over here, but he struggles a little in this little mid-range, right? But this guy, absolutely, right? Apply this theory to AT guns as well, right? Remember how we talked about how shots come out of the barrel in this game? They do not magically come out of this unit. So it may look like this barrel can shoot down, you know, over here, but that's just not the reality of the situation. It's just not angled correctly, right? You're not taking into account the terrain. And if you've ever studied any sort of, you know, military warfare over the last, you know, all of human existence, terrain's very, very, very important. And taking advantage of terrain is a key part of winning battles. Because now, right, I look at this. This is a tiny little crack, but I can shoot out all the way over here. If there's a tank over there, it's gone, right? But it can't shoot anything like right here. It just can't, because it's just the way that the terrain is angled. So generally you want to keep your AT guns and infantry support weapons in a way that, in a sort of angle where you can see exactly the funnel that you're trying to shoot at, and preferably not get flanked too easily, right? So, you know, ridge lines, this sort of stuff is really useful. Peaks is really good. You know, in between the crevices of little cover and things like that are really good. Same thing with your indirect fire. This mortar round, if it hits the roof of this building, would kill the mortar team. So if I slap them right here, this mortar team will die. I don't want them to die, so I'm not going to do that. But, you know, just keep in mind that this is firing a live round out of this barrel, right? So from here, it's totally fine, right? Because there's nothing in the way of this angle. But many players kill their rocket artillery by hitting a tree or something like that directly in front of them, because they're not taking account of the fact that they need a clear pathway for this shell to fire and land. This is sort of why field guns are very strong in this game, right? The difference between a field gun and an AT gun is an AT gun is very good at killing tanks, right? AT guns are incredible at killing tanks and sometimes can kill infantry pretty good with HE shells, right? Just look at this velocity. That will cut straight through a tank, right? Especially an early war tank. But this LEIG, you'll notice, will fire in an arc. So watch this. Oh, maybe maybe that's not the best example. Let's try this again. Right? So he can hit this field, like, very easily, actually, in a way that this AT gun simply cannot, because it's firing straight forward. It can only fire in a straight line. This field gun can fire in an arc. Now, the difference is that this thing is not firing, you know, armor-piercing, high-explosive rounds. This is firing just simple, old, high-explosive. And sometimes it can fire heat rounds, but heat rounds are not made to really penetrate a tank per se. Whereas these APC or APHE rounds will absolutely cut through a tank like butter, right? This is more meant for general support, support weapon elimination, MG team elimination, or shocking the crew of a tank, or wiping out squads. It's not really meant for tank killing per se. So these things may look very similar. This LEIG, which is an infantry support gun, and this pack, which is an AT gun, are used for actually very different purposes based on this firing arc, right? In general, you'll find your field guns and infantry support guns are very, very, very useful for that matter. Like, because you can just set them behind this hill, and you know they're not gonna. There's no way that infantry can really take them out because they're just gonna have a field day firing over this terrain, no problem. Whereas this AT gun has to be a lot more vulnerable, and you know can actually get shot out pretty easily. Okay, so now that we've discussed all the types of support weapons, we will move on to armor. Right. So it's pretty self-explanatory, the differences between light armor and heavy armor. Your light armor tab will include vehicles like your 222s, your Opel Blitz trucks, which are flak trucks, things like that, as well as just, you know, armored support. So they will move faster, but they have paper-thin armor, you know. You're typical. They can be killed by handheld AT, no problem. Whereas your heavy armor is going to be a lot harder to kill, generally. It helps to know your actual tanks in real life, because these are all pretty faithfully modeled in terms of where the armor is and whatnot. If you play a lot of War Thunder, you'll be pretty familiar with this. But it is actually important to keep in mind the benefits of heavy versus light armor and what your armor actually looks like, because in this game, and again, if you played War Thunder, you'd be familiar with this, but the internals of your tanks are actually simulated. All the mechanics of your tank are simulated as they would be in real life. So if we hover over this tank, we'll see that it has 10 to 30 hull armor. That generally means that you'll have 30 millimeters of armor in the front of the tank, where it's most likely to get shot, and 10 millimeters in things like this back end and things like that to save on weight, right? You'll also see that the armor is sloped. These will actually ricochet rounds. You know, your turret armor is also 10 to 30. Most likely, just assume it's in the front. That's generally how a tank is constructed. And yes, so these slopes will ricochet rounds. We can maybe demonstrate that in a minute. But it's important to angle your armor correctly using right-click and drag, or through direct control, you know, simply maneuvering it the way you want. Because ricocheting shots is very, very important. You don't want to take a full round from anything as a tank. Tanks are actually a lot more vulnerable in this game than they are in many other real-time tactics or real-time strategy games. Part of this is because, you know, although they can ricochet a round that hits them right at the, you know, a sloped angle and not really do anything, like this thing's not going to take anything, especially if I hit it in the front, like it's not going to happen. But if I walk to the side and I hit this with an AT gun, even a handheld AT gun, look, I just killed a crewman. You'll see it pops up on my kill feed. A crewman died from that, right? Same way, the hull is now yellow. That shows its lower integrity because it just took a round, right? And so now it's going to be more vulnerable to follow-up shots and kind of needs repairs. In the same way, all tanks have a simulated engine, have a turret, and cannon, coax, treads, and all these mechanics can go down. As well as the fact that all of the crew members inside of this can die. This thing started with 5 infantry crewmen inside, which I can pop out at any time by just clicking them. Now it's only 3 guys, but these guys can die inside of this thing. And they don't necessarily have to die from a round penetrating the tank. They can also die from shock. If, say, a bundle grenade were to hit the side of this tank, it would probably wipe the crew entirely. Even if it doesn't penetrate, it doesn't need to. It just needs to knock out the engine or do something to that effect. I'll show you again. I'm going to hit the engine. Now the engine is yellow, so it can survive a single Panzerbusch round, but something like this AT gun example would completely wipe it. Also, a very well-placed AT gun round into the center can ammo rack a tank and just melt it from the inside, literally just exploding it immediately if the ammo is compromised. So be very, very careful about how you angle your armor. Always angle the front in front of an enemy, you know, and don't take shots from the side, don't take shots from the back. You'll find that your armor, even the highest class of armor, you know, everything up until like a Tiger or an IS-2 will probably get absolutely wrecked from a shot, like a heat round or something hitting its side, or an APHE that connects with its ammo rack or something like that. They will get absolutely annihilated. So be very, very, very careful. That's also why tank duels in this game are so thrilling, because a single round from a tank can annihilate any other tank. So you want to keep them at max distance if you can. You'll see the tanks actually have a lot of range. I think based on this terrain, I can't really demonstrate the full range, but you know, it will fire a lot further than even like a field gun, to be honest. You know, these are rounds that can go far. So you never want to be right in front of an enemy with a tank, because, you know, silly old Panzerwüst guy will come over and he'll throw an AT grenade right onto your engine block. Which, by the way, I'll also point that out. If I tell him to throw an AT grenade on this engine, like if I point at the engine, this is going to be a lot more effective than throwing it from the front. I'll demonstrate why right now. Because see, you'll actually hit that engine, and now the engine's cooked. If I threw it at the front, that would not have happened because the engine would not have gotten compromised. All right, so let's imagine that you're playing with a Panzer III, all right? And you have a Soviet PTRD squad that comes up behind you and sort of starts wrecking your engine, right? Let's look at that. Didn't do much. All right. So this a PTRD squad just came behind your Panzer III and wrecked your engine, right? You have this beautiful Panzer III. You know, it can do all the good stuff. It can shoot. It can turn, as usual. However, you'll find that it is completely immobile. It does not allow you to move, right? That's because the engine is absolutely cooked, as is either visible on its model or in the bottom left down here with the red engine. All right, so what you're going to want to do is actually repair this. This thing is not just dead, and you definitely should not waste the manpower that you spent on it. Instead, a quick shortcut would just be pressing Shift R to repair, which will send a crew member out and automatically start repairing this. Okay, and keep in mind the tank crew members are twice as fast at repairing vehicles as normal infantry are. So normal infantry can also repair vehicles if you need them to. But I would always recommend getting a tank crew. In the same breath, tank crew are just better at maneuvering vehicles, right? You'll see that they have 100% efficiency. If we kill these guys, they'll drop to 80, 60, 20 efficiency, and just the loading, charging, aiming process is way worse. And you're going to find yourself losing tank duels, right? So this guy can repair if I tell him to with Shift R. You can also just have, you know, if somebody's around and you need these guys in here for some reason, you just press down here, item options, repair, and then click on this. As long as there is a repair kit inside of this thing, it's totally fine for them to start repairing. In this, you'll also notice that these tanks have fuel, or jerry cans that can be filled up with fuel. They have repair kits within them. They have specific shell amounts. They can swap shells with spacebar when you're like equipped, or down here you can select the shells. There's APCHE, which is armor piercing high explosive, and APCR, which I can't remember what it refers to, but basically it just means that it doesn't explode inside. It just cuts straight through. And yeah, so see, it's already repaired. And good as new. That took, what, like a minute for this guy to do, right? And now you're back on it. No big deal. So never count your tanks out. They're always good. They're always solid in battle. Okay. That pretty much does it. I'm going to now, in part 2, go over a basic game of Gates of Hell Ostfront, where you can feel free to follow along. In this gameplay, I will try to use just early war Germany as simply as possible to show you that you don't need to be using all this direct control nonsense. You don't need to be splitting your squads up. You know, you don't have to be doing this. You don't have to be doing that. These are all mechanics that are very, very useful. But honestly, these are more advanced mechanics that you don't need to use all the time. The most important thing in this game is just to have fun, because this game rules. So yeah, let's hop back into part 2 and see you there.